Okay, it is 7 p.m. I am calling the meeting of the work study group relative to the police commissions to order on Monday, October 18th. We are in the Aldermanic Chamber and also via Zoom conference. The Zoom meeting link can be found on the agenda and on the city's website. We will start off with the clerk, please taking roll.
All right, Alderwoman Kelly,
I'm here.
Alderman Dowd,
Present.
Eva Castillo, Nick Dahl is present, Mary Lou Blaisdell,
Here.
Mark Brave, Kendra Smith,
Here.
Deborah Novotny,
Here.
and Carrie Baxter.
Here. We have 7 members present.
Yep.
Thank you. Also in attendance this evening, we have Mayor Jim Donchis, Councilor Pignatelli, Chief Heffern, who am I missing?
Me.
Oh yes, and all the aldermen. Alderman Klee, Alderman Karen, and Alderman Wilshire. All right, we are going to begin this evening with public comment. I'm going to start in the chamber first. If you have comment on anything that is in the work study group conversation, please come to the mic, state your name and address, and we will do Zoom after we do in the chamber.
Good evening. My name is John Sullivan, 30 Holbrook Drive, Nashua, New Hampshire. I'm going to speak tonight in opposition to the Police Commission charter question. It's not for all the reasons you've heard before, but I want to pull back and try to lower the temperature in the room. Regardless of how this vote comes out on November 2nd, the city is divided over how our current police commissioner should be chosen. This question comes into a city already divided over a continuing pandemic and how we should proceed with daily life, as well as a national political environment that has only gone to build contempt amongst neighbors. These things are happening because of bad leadership. Good public policy needs sound debate, devoid of politics and posturing. Talking with folks this election season, and while this is only anecdotal, people don't know why we're doing this now. Those in favor of this change will argue this is local control. Nashua's government is set up to represent the people. The Board of Aldermen represent the people. In August, the people spoke, and they said, let's not do this now. Let's wait and talk more about it. Yet city leadership blew through that and said to the people, I don't care what you think. We need to do this anyway. What are we doing? City leadership should be striving to unite this city and not further divide it. If you don't think this is dividing Nashua, you're not paying attention. This question simply being on the ballot is harming Nashua. If I were to walk around town right now and ask 100 people what needs fixing, how we run our police department wouldn't even make the top 5. Start doing things that unite this city. Stop putting agendas over the public good. It's not the way out. Mayor Donchis and I are Nashua Rotarians. The Rotary mantra is service above self. In each meeting, Rotarians are asked to recite something called a 4-way test. Let me state this test Rotarians are asked to abide by in all things we do and say. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Now, you have to get a 100% on this test. You can't get 3 out of 4 and expect to pass. It's all or nothing. Is question 2 building goodwill or better friendships? Is it? Or is question 2 just a chance to notch a win from my side? Leadership should unite, not divide. Great leaders sometimes need to step back and listen to all sides and maybe hit the pause button, because it's not good for the whole, but for the few.
Your time's up.
When do we want to start breaking the culture of contempt? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have the record show that Mark Brave has joined us via Zoom.
Thank you.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. I just have a question on format tonight. This is public comment, and then there's a discussion involving all the wards. Is that where people can comment as well? I'm just confused on the format.
So we're running this as public comment with 3 minutes each person. If you have questions to your ward, our aldermans can pull them up when we bring the rest of the people to the table to talk.
So there will be a question period?
There'll be a question period within this horseshoe, yes.
Okay, but right now this is just 3 minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay, so,
Can you just speak right into the mic so we can hear you clearly? Thank you, Lori.
sure. I don't have anything formally written, but I've been out and I've knocked on a lot of doors. And what I've learned from this experience is that the gut feel of this board and those who voted against it to request that it be tabled or not brought to the ballot, I think was spot on. The voters out there have no clue what this is about. And it's very hard to lead an education campaign when newspaper publications are so limited, and the pandemic took its toll on linking people together and getting us out, and we still live in this quasi-pandemic mode. I think it was a big mistake to see this go on the ballot. I'm disappointed with the lack of leadership provided by those who voted against it in the chamber to step up and actively campaign and help educate those out in the public on this issue. There seems to be too small a group trying to do that, and there's not enough time to do that. By the time this was put on the ballot, we only had months to work an education campaign, and as you can see from the turnout at your last meeting for wards 1, 4, 5, and 6, there weren't many people there. You know, I've been a pretty big critic of city government, and I've been accused of being the cause of people leaving the city, workers. I don't really think that's the case, and my criticisms have been very focused on the leadership of this city. And I think we have major leadership issues. Our leaders aren't doing the right things to unite this community and for the greater good of this community. And that needs to stop. So I'll have questions as we proceed. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Sue Newman, 25 Charlotte Avenue. I really wasn't planning to speak. I just want to follow Mrs. Ortolano's comments. When I see signs that say support the police, vote no, I think that's a problem also. I may agree or I may not agree that there's not enough information out there that everybody has, but I do know that a lot of people signed the petition to get the question on the ballot. And anybody that I've talked to about it, this is not about not supporting the police. I believe wholeheartedly that you can be totally supportive of our police and still be a yes on this question. Thank you.
Anyone else from the chamber? Okay. We'll go to Zoom. If you are on Zoom and would like to speak, either physically raise your hand or raise your Zoom hand for me, please. Sonia?
Hi, thank you very much. Mr. Sullivan claims just now that I am aiming to divide with my citizens petition, which is not the case. With all due respect, Mr. Sullivan, people with your gender and who look like you have always had a seat at the table since the beginning of time. I remind you that every city and town in New Hampshire including 9 who are nationally certified with CALIA, are also have local control. So Nashua is the last one to make this charter change. And let me correct you, the Board of Aldermen tabled the vote to study the question. So AKA, they delayed it. I do have a question for Chief Kerrigan and wonder if he travels around New Hampshire with his family at all. I wonder because if maybe you stay in Massachusetts or Nashua only because you feel, our city would be in imminent danger if we chose to have our own police commission chosen locally, because that's what everybody else does. So I wonder if you feel unsafe when you travel to other towns, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you live in Litchfield, where there is local control there. Do you feel unsafe in your own town? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom who would like to speak? There's lots of people on Zoom. I don't see anyone else, so we will move on to the discussion portion of this. We have a number of people in attendance this evening that the committee had requested come so that we can hear some background and ask some questions of you. We have Councilor Pignatelli here. I think we'll start there. If you could come join us at the Horseshoe. You can come sit right at the Horseshoe. Yep. Join the round table. And if you could just introduce yourself and looks like you might have something prepared.
I do.
Okay, go for it.
First of all, good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Deborah Pignatelli, and I live at 22 Apple Tree Green here in Nashua. With my 10 years of experience on the New Hampshire Executive Council, I was involved in the process of selecting police commissioners. I think that's why you invited me to address you tonight, right?
It is, yeah.
Clearly, no matter what the final outcome of this November's election, all of us and every citizen in Nashua want to have a strong and effective police department with unquestioned integrity. The Nashua Police Department has an excellent reputation in Nashua and Concord and around the state and beyond, and we certainly want it to stay that way. I think the ballot initiative raises an important question about local control over a significant part of city government, and the voters will have their say. As an executive counselor, I worked with 3 governors. Because I have been a longtime Nashua resident and served in various public offices, Governors Lynch and Hassan solicited my advice about Nashua Police Commission members. After I did my due diligence, they went along with my recommendations. I spoke with all candidates who expressed an interest. I was looking for individuals with a long record of civic involvement in Nashua, who had excellent reputations and wanted to undertake this important position. It was nonpartisan. I voted for Republicans and Democrats. So did Governors Hassan and Lynch. When I was in the state Senate, I sponsored and passed a bill requiring all nominees as judges to go through a public hearing. When I was first elected to the Executive Council in 2004, I initiated a policy of having public hearings for all leaders of our important state agencies, such as our Commissioner of Education, the Attorney General, the Commissioner of Health and Human Services, the Commissioner of the Department of Safety, and so on. Those hearings continue and have been recognized as an important part of the process of staffing these key positions. In retrospect, maybe I should have initiated a public hearing process right here in Nashua for police commissioners. In any event, I think that Governors Lynch and Hassan and I made good choices for this commission. Upon the current governor's arrival in the corner office, things changed. There was no interest, in my view, on Nashua Police Commission members. That was surprising because I was the counselor for this district, which is District 5, which includes Nashua and Hudson, Litchfield, and 31 other towns to the west of here. It also was odd and unfortunate, I believe, because I have been a 45-year resident of Nashua and a longtime state representative and state senator before my election to the Executive Council. I don't think that the current governor followed a good process when I was there. I am aware that other New Hampshire cities have passed charter amendments to return the decision about how police commissioners are appointed to local officials. In my 10 years in Concord on the council, I have not heard any complaints about these changes. Our mayor and aldermen are directly accountable to the citizens of Nashua for what they do in governing the city, including making important budget decisions. For the governor and council, there is little accountability on the selection of our police commissioners. I plan to vote in favor of this ballot question because I have more confidence in our local leaders making the right decisions for Nashua than an out-of-town governor and out-of-town members of the Executive Council who have little direct connection to Nashua. I'm sure you were hearing from many viewpoints and many people. Thank you for your service on this committee and your struggle to do what you think is best for our city. Public service is very important to decision-making, and you are surely doing your share. Thank you for listening to my thoughts on this matter. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you. I will put that to the committee for questions. Alderman Dowd.
Just information gathering. When you were on the executive council and you were considering people for the position of police commissioner in Nashua, did you have any women apply for that position?
I remember talking to one woman. I don't remember the year. It might have been in the 2012 to 2014, or it might have even been before that. But I determined that she was not a longtime resident of the city, and I don't think she was involved in government at all and in decision-making. But I understand that we've only had one woman in 100 and so years, and I knew Margaret Flynn, and she was an excellent commission member. So I was looking for people not like her, because I really don't think there's anyone else like her around, but for somebody who has a long Nashua history and has interest and has been interested in police commission, maybe attended police commission meetings, that sort of thing. So there was one woman that I spoke to.
So all of the people that were reviewed for their qualifications, and you selected the best candidate?
I didn't, to tell you the truth, I didn't have that many people call me and talk to me about the possibility of them serving. If I knew of someone who I thought would make a good police commissioner for our city, I reached out to them. Some of them were interested, some not.
Thank you.
But I would have talked to anybody who called and asked to be considered for this important job.
Okay. All set.
All set? Other committee questions?
Deb, do you know, it's been stated many times that Nashua is the last city that doesn't have control over nominations to their police commission. Do you know what city in New Hampshire had it prior to us, and what precipitated their change to local control versus state control, of why that happened?
You know, I don't have a really good history of that. I know there were 5 cities, and 4 of them eventually chose to have local control. Some of the police commissioners are elected, some appointed.
And may I follow up? And,
Yes. Go ahead.
as by being on the executive council and working through this process, it sounds to me like prior to the current governor in office, it was pretty nonpartisan as far as who served on this. it wasn't looked at. It was totally a nonpartisan approach to appointing somebody, is that correct?
That's the
For the
way I
most part,
found it,
you found
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other committee members?
Good evening, thank you for being here. It's just looking for your thoughts on whether you think the firewall between the Independent Police Commission and city politics is a valuable thing? Is it good for Nashua citizens?
I'm not sure about that. I think that as close as you can get to local control in making important decisions, it's probably better. And when I look at our current administration, we have a very dysfunctional governor's council and governor. And I trust our leadership in Nashua to get it right. Also, the leadership in Nashua is responsible to the people. If the leadership does not make good decisions, there's a chance for them to be voted out. But as far as my recollection is, it was never an important decision when I was running for election, and it's never brought up when the governor is running for election.
Okay. I do have two follow-ups, if I could.
Go ahead.
And Chief Heffern is here tonight, we'll hear from him. But I was just curious you said you're a 45-year resident in Nashua, so I assume you were here in the 90s when a number of aldermen were investigated and 3 of them ended up in prison? Mm-hmm. Okay. And regarding the Governor Sununu and your time on the Executive Council, I believe all 3, well, I actually know all 3 of the councilors were reappointed, and all 3 of them had been selected by Governor Hassan. So do you think that might have played a factor into why Governor Sununu didn't reach out and solicit input from you, because he was just going to renominate the 3 councilors that Governor Hassan had nominated?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee?
Question.
Ms. Bosco?
You cited that you don't have faith basically in the leadership in Concord to appoint commissioners. There are people sitting behind you who feel that way about the leadership here at the local level in Nashua. So how would Nashua be harmed? How would the citizens be harmed by keeping the current commission system?
I don't know about that, but I know that if the city leaders who are elected by the citizens make bad decisions, there's the opportunity to elect other leaders. And that's part of the political process. If you're elected and people don't like what you're doing, you're accountable. But the state leaders are not accountable for this decision anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the committee? I have a list, but I want to make sure everyone out here has their questions answered. Anyone on Zoom? Make sure I didn't miss anybody. Okay. So I have a few questions, and then you mentioned, let's start a little bit more simply here. I don't think everyone listening knows exactly how it works from when someone is thought to be a potential candidate to when it hits the counselors. Can you just walk us through what that looks like so that everybody can hear and understand that?
Sure. So right now, the way it is that the governor nominates and the council votes on nominees for the police commission and any other commission, and appointments to state agency heads. The governor nominates and the council confirms or doesn't confirm. So every year, I believe one of the police commissioners is appointed or reappointed or voted on. So when Governor Lynch and Governor Hassan were in office, and the time came for a Nashua Police Commissioner to be nominated, they would approach me and say, you've been in Nashua for a long time. Who do you think would be appropriate on this important commission? And I, because I've been a longtime resident and know a little bit about city government, would think about it, and either somebody would call me and say, I might have an interest in this, or I would look at very qualified people that I might have a relationship with or might know, and ask them if they had an interest in serving on our police commission.
So to clarify, it has to start with the governor and then brought to you guys. If the governor had someone brought to him or her that they didn't feel was qualified, it wouldn't even make it to your desk.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Is it because I have a mask on? Is that better? My question was, so to clarify, if the governor's really the first step there. If the governor felt someone wasn't qualified, it wouldn't go to the executive counselors.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Mhm.
You also mentioned that the process, you didn't love the way the process went with the current governor. You hinted a little bit about why, because you talked about how it worked in the past. Is there anything additional that you would have liked to have seen in terms of coming up with those names?
I'm not sure I know what you mean, but the current governor was not interested in my recommendation for members of the police commission. I think that he wanted to do it his own way and nominate people who he liked, or renominate people rather than look for someone else who might be qualified. And that's how it went when he was in office, when I was there from 2018 to 2020.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I was just asking, you've told me like how it went and how it went before. Is there anything additional you would love to see happen?
Mm-hmm.
As someone who's been a part of that process?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering, like, you're telling me what happened.
Yeah.
Is there anything additional that you would love to see happen in finding out who those commissioners could be?
Well, I think probably, as I said in my testimony, in retrospect, I would have liked to have had a public hearing
Thank you. That's what I was looking
for the public to come in and testify about who was getting nominated.
Perfect. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. I don't have any more questions for the counselor. Is there anyone else in the chamber? I know I said committee. Are there any aldermen or? No?
I have a question, please.
Go ahead.
I have a question, please.
Can you state your name and record? Your name for the record? Address? Sorry. Words.
Elizabeth Liu, 17 Roby Street.
Go ahead,
Can you
Alderman
hear me?
Liu.
Thank you.
Are you you're coming up as Oliveri, that's you though.
Olivier Selhay, yeah, I'm at my son-in-law's house and we couldn't get on and, yeah, I'll have to change my name there.
I just
I
didn't
apologize
recognize you.
for that.
Sorry, that Alderman Liu, go ahead.
Thank you. If I could just ask Ms. Pignatelli, what would local vetting, I think what I'm curious to hear is what questions do we need to ask of appointed, prospective appointees to the police commissioner, to the police commission? I understand that you feel that it hasn't gone well this term with Governor Sununu, but you might be surprised to know that Mayor Donches has never consulted me about an appointment either. But regardless, what type of vetting is expected or do you think would be appropriate for someone for this position? Thank you.
Well, I don't know whether I'm qualified to answer that, but when I vetted men and women to be on other committees or members of commissions that we were having in the state or commissioners for our important government, I would want to know whether the individual believed in the mission of the agency they were going to lead, whether they were good listeners, and whether they had integrity, and what their experience might be. So I think some of those things might be some of the things that we might want to ask future police commissioners, and I certainly would encourage public hearings. I think giving the public a chance to have a say in who's appointed is a benefit to the citizens.
Thank you. May I just do a follow-up, please?
Go ahead, Alderman Lou.
Thank you. Ms. Pignatelli, how many times when you were serving on the executive council, how many local, quote unquote, local Nashville recommendations did you receive from the mayor or the Board of Aldermen?
Well, one of the people that I convinced or asked to be on this commission was a former alderman. I did not necessarily receive recommendations for the mayor, from the mayor or the Board of Aldermen, to my recollection. This was starting in 2004 to 2010, so I don't have a strong recollection from then. But from 2018 to 2020, I did not receive any recommendations from Nashua locals, nor was my opinion sought as to who I thought would be a good commissioner by the governor.
And just a follow-up, please?
Go ahead, Alderman Lou.
Thank you. Ms. Pignatelli, would that be because these recommendations were being sent to the governor and perhaps stalled there? Surely.
I don't have any knowledge of that.
I see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
If I could?
Alderman Schmidt, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman. And thank you, Councilor Pignatelli. Pignatelli, you have done a yeoman's job for us up in Concord. And I wanted to tell you, you are so missed, so incredibly missed up there. I just wanted to say you were very right. What the people of Nashua really want from this in the long run is that we can watch the process. We can be part of the process should we choose, but we can also know what's going on, to hear the answers to questions about service, about interest, about knowledge. All of this is really important to us. And I understand in the year 2013, there was another huge question about the makeup of the police commissioner. Now, I haven't had a chance to research this, but I really would like people to take a look and see what that's about. Anyway, thank you very much for letting me speak, and thank you again, Councilor Pignatelli.
You're welcome.
Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you.
Alderman
Just
Dunn.
for the record, I did reach out to our executive counselor on 2 occasions regarding the police commission. Thank you. Not for nominations, but I did reach out a few times to voice my opinion.
Thank you, Alderman Wilshire. Alderman Dowd.
Yes, as you mentioned, you represented Nashua and several of the small cities west of here. When I ran for the state senate, I got to visit all those small communities, and their local governments are a handful of people. So I'm wondering how many, one of the things that I'd like answered over the time of this committee is, how many different ways are there that people are appointing police commissioners in the towns and cities? Portsmouth has an election. Manchester, they get selected, but they're advisory only. The police chief works for the mayor. And I'm not sure about the other towns when you go west of here. Do you have any idea of maybe the different ways that they do that?
I don't know. I don't know the answer, Alderman Dowd, I'm sorry. I know that some police work directly for the boards of selectmen.
Mhm. And I know in some of those towns, the Board of Selectmen's like 3 people.
Yes.
So it's local control, but it's very selected control. But, you know, I'd like a chance to talk to some of those people and find out pros and cons. You know, I think that the more information we have in making a decision like this, it's more important than expediting something. So, thank you.
You're
And by the
welcome.
way, thank you for all your service, and I hope you're not done.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Counselor Pignatelli? Love to. All right, I would like to thank you for being here and for your service. We very much appreciate it as a committee, and I personally appreciate it, so thank you. We will go ahead and move on. Sorry, I bumped my mic because I'm taking analog notes. Thank you so much. I'll have that put in the record. Okay, so next we have the mayor and Linda Pintridge. Do you guys want to come? Did I say your name right? I'm sorry. I hope I did.
Hi, my name's Linda Pintridge. Just a quick introduction. I don't have really prepared written
Sorry,
statements.
Linda. Can you just do your name and address for the
Sure.
record before you
My
go?
name is Linda Pintridge. I live at 59 Farmington Road in Nashua. I've lived in the city of Nashua since 1990. My husband and my 2 sons grew up here, went through public schools here. Now they're both young men. I am a professor of criminal justice and a department chair for the criminal justice department at Middlesex Community College. I am in my 33rd year with the college. I am, and I've said this to everybody I've spoken to about this issue, I am not here to question the integrity of the Nashua Police Department, nor am I here to question the integrity of the current police commissioners. I happen to know Nick Dahl quite well. I have the utmost respect for him. I've worked with Nick for many, many years because I've been tied in with the PAL organization. Coached in the PAL cross-country program here in Nashua since my guys were in elementary school. They're now 20 and 25. So that is not my reason for being here. My reason for being here is I question the process of selecting the commissioners. And the reason why I always ask students, I always tell my students to question things that you don't understand. So one, why are we the only one in New Hampshire that does not have local control? 2, why do we have a process in place that has only had 1 female commissioner on the board in 130 years? And for me, I also question why the process, as we've heard from other speakers, isn't more open, public, and transparent. In 2016, I was called by a friend and retired police officer from the city of Nashua who had been asked to put forward some recommendations or a recommendation for a police commissioner. His recommendation was me. At the time we spoke about it, he inferred that there had been very few to 1 female commissioner in the past, so not quite sure how my chances would be, but we discussed it and I agreed for him to put my name forward. I was not contacted, nor was I vetted, nor was I interviewed. So I don't really know what happened to my name or where it went. So that's my personal story, and it's probably also why I question the process. I firmly believe that the public, the citizens of Nashua, should be involved. I think it should be a more open process. I think we should know more about it. I think we should be able to ask questions about it. I also favor the idea of having more than 3 commissioners. I think that anytime, I think with the 5-member board, you bring more perspectives, more diversity to the board, more and different backgrounds to the board. So that's also another reason why I favor it. I'll gladly take questions if you have any.
Thank you for being here. Are there questions from the committee or anyone in attendance? Chair Shardell.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Nick.
I have the utmost respect for you as well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
But I do want to ask, in 2016, I know who the governor was. Do you remember who the executive counselor was at the time?
I do not.
Okay.
I think it was Wheeler, but I do not remember.
I think at the time of that nomination, it was still Councilor Pignatelli, but I could be wrong. And I would just like to say for the record as well that I know that I applied more than once. I never got an interview the first time from Councilor Pignatelli, and I know Matt Plant applied more often than I did, and he never got an interview from Councilor Pignatelli till the 3rd or 4th time he applied. But I thank you for your willingness to serve and for sharing your opinions.
Thank you, Nick.
Other questions from the committee? Getting quieter by the minute here. Anyone from Zoom? I just want to make sure I'm not missing anyone. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your time.
Did you want to, all right, go ahead, Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. Are you aware that there's only been one woman on the fire department here in Nashua?
On the commission?
Yes. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think there's a reason that only one woman has been a police commissioner and one woman has been a fire commissioner?
I don't think there's one reason. Perhaps women are overlooked or maybe are not nominated as often as males. But I find it strange to think that in 100 and something years that we haven't had more qualified women that would be willing to serve as commissioners.
Thank you.
We've only had one woman mayor as well. All right, anyone else? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time.
And then I would like to call up Chief Heffern, please.
Linda did.
I didn't even.
I'll leave it
notice.
on. I'll leave it on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for inviting me this evening. My name is Timothy Heffern. I live here in Nashua. Every so often, I think
Can you
this
just
is the
state your
second-
address? Sorry.
144 Manchester Street in Nashua.
Thank you very much.
Every so often, I think this is the second or third time this topic becomes available, and they wheel me out of the mothballs and bring me forward. Mostly it's because of the Alderman investigation. There's been an awful lot rehashed about that, and I'm sure most of you are tired of me talking about it. The reason I continue to talk about it is because I saw firsthand how that investigation could have gone had local control been involved and had people of influence been able to stop the investigation when they wanted it to be stopped. I'm here this evening to answer questions. I also have other firsthand anecdotal stories that I could tell you, that it's not just limited to one Alderman investigation, a one-off, so to speak, from 1993 or 1995. There was an additional allegation within the last 20 years while I was working for the department. It involved someone of significant political influence in the city, and a serious allegation was made against that individual. I received that information firsthand. During the course of arranging to formalize the allegation by the complaining person, the person of influence became aware of it. I never understood how, and expressed extreme anger, disdain for the police department, and was basically furious that we would entertain this allegation. What ensued shortly after that was this individual, for lack of a better term, got cold feet and retracted what he had initially said and refused to cooperate any further. As a result, our investigation could go no further, and it kind of died there. I'm being very vague about the details because clearly nothing ever occurred, and I don't want to besmirch anyone's reputation. But my point in bringing that up is that watching the reaction and the influence, knowing the influence that this individual had, there is no question in my mind that the same effort would have been made with the department had we pursued that particular allegation as far as getting us to stop. And it was nice to know at the time that had we continued, we would have been able to do that investigation like the other one without any fear of reprisal or any concern about job action against us because we worked independently for the police commission. I've also heard an awful lot said about other agencies in the state who have had this system and have left it. Back in 1996, the department decided to create a full-time internal affairs professional standards division, and it had never been done before. And I was the poor soul that they selected to be that individual. I became the least popular person in the department, and I wrote all the policies, created the unit, and then they told me, we're gonna send you to every school, everywhere in the country. We want you to be the most knowledgeable cop about internal affairs and employee rights and investigations. And they sent me everywhere. And I went to conferences, seminars, schools throughout the country, and after the day of class, you would join with other internal affairs people from LA, from Texas, from small towns, big towns, and people would just talk. They would tell war stories. Some of the stories I heard from some of the individuals were jaw-dropping with some of the types of allegations they were in misconduct, they were investigating, and the monetary damages that those communities were paying out as a result of that misconduct was staggering. But the common theme was, when asked, they attributed most of that misconduct, not all, but the significant amount of it, was to poor hiring practices by their agencies. And by that, they went on to explain that it was as a result of people being hired that had no business being hired. They were being hired because they or their family knew someone. They or the family were benefiting as a result of someone making a phone call, a high-placed phone call, and getting someone on the job when they weren't being considered because of merit. I remember that. I remember hearing some of these stories, and I remember coming back to then Chief Cliff Largy and telling him of these people regaling me with these stories and telling him, we have no idea how lucky we have it here based on how we do business compared to what goes on around the state. Part of that responsibility, the chief at the time told me, I'm gonna make it even more fun for you. You are gonna be the first full-time guy in the state, and you're gonna investigate other agencies when they need help. So they started sending me out around the state when other departments either couldn't or didn't want to conduct internal investigations on their own officers. Some of those departments that I went to, the chief flat out told me when I met with them, I need someone independent because I am controlled by the local selectman, town manager, or mayor, and they won't let me do this, but they did agree to allow someone independent to come in and conduct this investigation. So I saw firsthand, I heard firsthand from police administrators how they were curtailed in their ability to do what they considered to be the right thing because they couldn't, because they had local control that had that power and that influence over them. I've also heard that maybe we should have this election. We should have these councilors elected, the commission elected. I know it's one incident, but I think it's symptomatic of what occurs an awful lot of times. Back in the mid-90s, there was a man that ran, I think, and he was elected, Tom Alcier. He had a long history of being a proponent for having the police officers killed. And he had that position for a long time before he ran, and yet he got elected. And I remember it was hard copy at the time or inside edition. One of the California news agencies contacted me, flew out here and put me on TV to talk about how they could not believe that a local city of this size, local voters would elect somebody who had that posture and propose killing police officer. It was actually rather embarrassing. I had police officers from around the country calling in, amazed, not so angry at Alcier, but outraged that the voters would overlook this and not do their due diligence and bring this guy in. So when we talk about electing police commissioners, I'm concerned that human nature being what it is, that there will be times when there will be people that will not do their due diligence, and it may be for good reasons. Maybe they're busy, they have families, they have work, and they have everything else, and they don't get a chance to really vet the individuals. I heard Councilor Pignatelli say something that caught my attention. She said that what bothered her was that that the people making the decision on appointing commissioners, they were all from outside Nashua. It's been my understanding for 28 years with the department, that's exactly the way it was designed, that the people making that decision would not be from Nashua. They wouldn't care who was appointed, in the sense that they would have no interest in the day-to-day machinations of how the department works. That was the design of it, was that they wouldn't be from Nashua. So I take exception to what she said in that respect. I think that was the way it's been, and I think this, over time, it's morphed into an expectation of something else. But I think that's the way it was set up. When the corruption here, we have books in the department in the safe that go back and describe how this all came to be. This city was the most corrupt city in the state, and that's why this city went to that form, because they tried the old way, and they ended up with what so many departments have today, which is a mess. I'll also say this. In my time, I've spoken to many officers similar to me, and you won't hear it publicly. Yes, there are other departments that have left this form of commission. You won't hear it publicly because they'll never talk about it. But I've talked to them firsthand, and they'll tell me things. One guy told me that I knew pretty well. He said, my wife thinks I'm a raging alcoholic. And I said, why? Well, because we have a system where if I want to get promoted, I've got to go to a certain watering hole, and I've got to rub elbows with the politicians that go there. And if I don't, I'm not going to be considered. And I have no reason to question the veracity of this particular individual based on the time I knew him and the seriousness with which he explained his frustration for that. So when we talk about, we hear no problems elsewhere, you don't, but it's not because they're not there on many occasions, it's because people don't want to talk about it. I will say in closing here, I have no stake in this personally. I prefer not to public speak at this stage of my life, but I feel a sense of responsibility in this. From everybody but Carignan, Chief Carignan, I hired, or I recommended for hire. They're the two deputy chiefs, the captains, probably most of the lieutenants. They're the heirs of the department's future. And when I hired people, and I did the hiring from 1996 until I left in 2007, I sat down with each officer before they were hired, and I explained to them what I expected of them, but I also explained to them what they could expect from us. And one of the high points that I said was that you could come here, it'll be based on merit. You'll be hired based on merit. I don't care who you know. I don't want to know anything about who you might know or who your family might know. If you get hired, it's based on your merit, and if you work your way through the career and you have upward mobility, it's completely based on merit. All those individuals today are in those positions now because they followed that formula. And I can't help but think some of them would be very disillusioned if suddenly that formula, which has worked, would suddenly change. And I think that I would feel terrible that I suddenly made a promise and a condition of employment to them that has suddenly been taken out from under them. And again, I say this because I've seen it. I've seen a number of things happen as a result of local control. And if I guess I would offer as a compromise, if the citizens of Nashua want to vet potential candidates for that process in Concord, then I'm all for it. But to actually have that control and suddenly have that control over the police department, what goes on, what doesn't happen, that bothers me. We've all seen Seattle. We've all seen what's going on there. Antifa is in Nashua. I don't know if you've heard that, but they're here. I don't know that they're here to stay or whether they're just passing through, but amazingly, Antifa, or a faction of it, are in Nashua. Can you imagine, and this is just hypothetical, can you imagine, like Seattle, if suddenly we have a mayor or a board of aldermen in place at that particular time that say, similar to the mayor in Seattle did, let them express themselves. We'll have, I think one of the mayors said it's the summer of love or something like that, and they just said, police, stand down, and let them do what they have to do and express themselves. It's still burning 2 years later. I am confident if that were to happen tomorrow in Nashua, the way the system is set up right now, the commission would not stand for it. There would be no ability for anybody politically to look at that and say, Chief, have your officers stand down, and we'll just see how this plays out. So I just caution you, there's a lot more. I know it sounds great, but there's sometimes unintended consequences of what is being offered here. And again, as I said back in July, I have yet to hear a compelling reason why we would want to abandon what truly has worked for 100 and something years. And that's all I have to say, and I'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chief. Mary Lou, go ahead.
Thank you for your time, Chief. Sure. During your tenure as Chief of Police here, and there would be an opening for somebody on the commission, were you influenced, or did you have any influence into who would be put on that commission, or did you feel, were you ever consulted on who should be put on the commission during your tenure?
Never. I had people call me and ask me, what would I have, what do you think I would, I'm interested, what should I do? But I never had anyone ever consult me, and I never made them a recommendation.
Thank you. And I know I've asked this question from the beginning of our study group, and I don't feel I have a good answer. And maybe you have some insight. You have just stated that this has worked well for the past 100 years. Why do you feel now there's the need and citizens feel that there is a need for change? Do you have any idea why?
I don't. I'm perplexed as to what this has grown from. I don't know. I can't answer that.
And finally, it keeps coming up a lot that we've only had one woman in the history of the commission. And I am all for women serving in any position that they can equally to men, but I think it's part of our job as women to get out there too. How many during your tenure women police officers? I mean, can you give me a percentage of how many women officers that you had within the police department?
It's higher today than it was.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
When I first came on, there were probably 1 or 2.
Uh-huh.
And I think when I left, there were probably 8 to 12.
Great.
I think. During that time, when I was the chief, I said this, I think, earlier in the summer. You have to keep that in context with a woman being there. I had various people call me and say, what do I do? And some people, it was offensive. Do I have to donate money to everybody in order to, get... but I never had a woman ask me. I had tons of men, but I never had a woman. So, as Councilor Pignatelli said when asked, I don't think she's had a lot of women express that desire. So it might not necessarily be that or someone was discriminating or discouraging women from participating on the commission. It may very well be that it just wasn't a job that many women were interested in. I don't know. But I think you have to keep that in context as to why there was only one.
And I think that a lot of us as citizens really had no understanding of how the commission was formed at all. And I think it's something that the majority of citizens in this city we do not understand. So thank you for coming tonight.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. I know it to be true that the National Police Department doesn't do favors and hire someone that maybe I would recommend. I did have a young man in my life who wanted to be a police officer. This was 10, 12 years ago. And, you know, he joined the Army Reserves, and he was in the military police unit over in Londonderry, and he worked so hard, and he wanted to be a police officer. You know, he thought that experience might give him a leg up, and, you know, he never asked me to ask the chief to hire him, and nor would I have asked the chief to hire him, because I know that's not the way National Police Department runs, and that's not the way they do business. I think if this referendum passes, that is going to be the way Nashua does business, which is unfortunate. Most voters, would you agree with that? Most voters out there have no idea what the National Police Commission is or does.
I would agree with that, and that's what concerns me about this question is I think people will be voting with not really a complete understanding of the impact, and it won't happen overnight. It'll be, but mark my words from my observations over my time, it'll be a slow, very steady, subtle deterioration of the way things are done, and you won't notice it, and most of you will probably have moved on. But boy, you'll lose it over time, and it will take forever, if at all, to ever get it back again. And that's what really concerns me. And to your point, I was called when I was the chief, I was called by Mayor Streeter. And he very politely, there was nothing unethical or wrong with what he was asking, but he said, Tim, he said, I've got a constituent of mine, his son wants to be a police officer. Great kid. I'd love to see him on the job. And I said to him, well, that's great, Mayor. Did he take the test? Yes, he did. Well, when his chance comes, in line with everybody else, we'll do the interview, we'll vet him, we'll do the background check. If he passes muster, fine. If he doesn't, he's going no further. When the kid came in, I interviewed him personally that particular day, and I wouldn't have left him alone in my office if I had to go out and answer the phone in the hallway. He had issues, and it was nice to know that I could walk him out the door and say, it's not gonna happen here for you, young man. And I walked him out the door, and I didn't feel like I, in any way, had jeopardized my own career because I crossed the mayor. And just to reinforce that, the mayor never said it in a way that was unethical or a threat or influence. It was just, he just wanted to put, probably somebody said, hey, Mayor, could you put a good word in for my son? He did that to appease someone, and it was left there. But it was just nice to know that I could do what we had always done, and I didn't feel like I had to bring this guy in, even though he was below our standards.
Follow up? Just a comment, actually. I want to thank you for coming out of the mothballs. We appreciate that. And just to let everyone know, the young man I was speaking of, who was a close friend of my family, is now a police officer, but not in Nashua.
Good for him.
So thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Baxter, go ahead.
Chief, you mentioned that there was an additional investigation where this individual got cold feet and didn't want to move forward.
Yes.
Can you just ballpark the time frame on that one, or what year it might have been?
I thought about it all day today, and I think to be safe and not to have anyone start doing math and so forth, I'll say within the last 20 years. I know that's very vague, but I don't want to start narrowing it down, then suddenly people start trying to figure out, could it have been this person? Okay, this time frame, it's that person. I really don't want to go there because nothing occurred from it. And
No, I only asked the question because a lot of people are dismissing the big investigation that you handled as, you know, sort of an anomaly, something that happened a long time ago and would never happen again. So that was the reason for that question.
This was probably at least, well, between 5 and 15 years after that one.
Okay. And just one more question, if I can.
Go ahead.
There's discussion as far as going from 3 commissioners to 5. Can you just weigh in on that, pros and cons for each?
I thought about it since I first heard it introduced. I have no problem with that. I do agree that maybe 5 people on a board brings more perspective, more diversity, and I have no problem with that. And I have no problem, as I said, with community people, finding people that have interest in doing their own vetting, and then if so, then putting it forward. And those people have to have the courage, as the current commissioners did, to throw their name out there and get in the ring for whatever happens. I have no problem with any of that. I just have a problem. I think human nature is what it is. If the mayor appointed someone to as an example, this is my take on it. If the mayor appointed somebody to the zoning board or the planning board, and that person, that was a coveted position, that person had sought for a while, and he or she got on there, and suddenly a piece of legislation or something came up, and the mayor made this person or the board aware that he wished for a desired outcome in that zoning or planning. Human nature being what it is, you don't have to answer me, but wouldn't you agree that there's a good likelihood that that individual might be willing to assist because of that appreciation and for that gratefulness that they feel for having been appointed by the very person that says, geez, I'd love your support on this. I think it's human nature. And as a result of that, that's what concerns me about that. If local people start appointing commissioners, and then suddenly those same people that did the appointing call the commissioner and say, hey, remember me? Geez, I got Johnny Jones here who would love to be a police officer. And suddenly the commissioner feels like, geez, they kind of got me here in the first place. I feel like I owe them something to at least look into it. And we're going in a different direction than we otherwise would. So that's kind of why I think human nature is the wild card in the process.
Ms. Baxter,
Just
go
a
ahead.
follow-up on that, you mentioned potential influence for hirings. Hirings are one thing, and there's also promotions, which are very important.
Yes.
What are your concerns with regards to influence on promotions?
Well, I guess it goes back to, that was part of my promise to the individuals I hired. You were one of those.
Yes, sir.
And I know, as I said before, I know of a Manchester police officer who a long time ago said, it's different up here. It's different. You've got to have support here and there. The chief works for the mayor. You've got to have things in line. You won't hear people talk about that, but it's the reality of what it is. And I can honestly say, unless it's changed drastically since I left in 2007, I can look you all in the face and say, it was not done that way when we were there. We picked people, and some people were hurt. We picked what we thought were the best people, because who doesn't want to surround themselves with the best people? But when you start getting surrounded by the people that you have available, but they weren't the best people in the first place, then suddenly everything starts to degrade and you end up with a different place. Many of the people we hired came from Massachusetts, myself included. And I would ask them, why are you here? And to a person, they would say, I heard I get a fair chance up here. Down there, it's all in who you know, and I don't know anybody, so I had always heard that Nashua hires based on standing on your own 2 feet. That's why I'm here. Massachusetts lost a tremendous amount of good, solid, qualified people over the years to our benefit. So I do think it affects promotion, it affects people's chances for upward mobility, or at least the perception in their minds, because they'll see somebody get passed by and they'll say, we know that that person knows somebody, and it just starts a cynicism, and it just changes the atmosphere and the culture.
Elsa,
Yes, thank you.
other committee members?
Jan?
Alderman Schick, go ahead.
Thanks very much. And thank you, Chief, for being there today.
You're welcome.
Last week, I got a call from somebody who told me that they voted for me and could I fix their parking ticket? I understand uncomfortable questions. It was easy for me to say no. That's what I would expect from anybody who is elected or appointed in the city. You're 100% right on Mr. Alcieri. I believe he had to step down from his position because he was identified as being interested in killing police. That was really scary. You are absolutely right about him. But you did say that you didn't have any problem with 5 being on the board. And for a person who would give pressure on one of the members, they would have to put pressure on 3 to actually make a difference. And I think that that's one of the reasons we wanted to move it to 5, because it would really give us much more stability in anybody putting any kind of pressure on somebody. We all know that people are people, and there's good people and there's people who aren't so good. And I think that there's one thing very interesting happening in the state. It's the Commission on Law Enforcement and Accountability and Community Transparency. Have you been part of that at all?
I have not.
It would be an excellent thing for everybody to read up on. I know right now they're trying to make some decisions about how to handle problems that they see or that are reported to them with the police. And I think having the state manage something like that might take that question away from our worries about local issues. And one more thing, the police are a department of the city. The commission is the link between the city and the police. They're not the same as the police. They're not members of the police force. They represent the city. Do you understand it, or do you agree that is absolutely necessary, that they need to separate themselves and be different and apart from the police force?
I do, and it was my understanding during my time that the commission was autonomous with the department. They oversaw certain portions of it, like the budget. And if I was disciplining someone or hiring or firing someone, I had to make that recommendation to the commission. But I always understood that they were my overseer and that they were separate and distinct from what the police department itself did.
One more thing, do they report to anyone when they see an issue that needs to be addressed? Does the commission ever get in touch with, I don't know, the mayor or the alderman? If there's a problem that they see, where do they take it beyond them?
I don't know. I know they would come to me if they saw something that was, or they heard of something that was occurring in the department, whether someone had contacted them. Sometimes the commissioners get contacted directly by the citizens. They bypass the police. Maybe they don't have trust or whatever, but they contact the commissioners, and the commissioners would bring some of those issues to myself and expect me to delegate it and look into it. As far as communication with other city leaders, I'm really not sure how they did that.
I think that'd be a very interesting thing to discuss. But anyway, thanks for your time. I truly appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you. Have a good night.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, okay, I have a couple questions. Both yourself and Councilor Pignatelli spoke about letting the people vet. Just wondering what you thought that might look like. She mentioned a public hearing, but what do you think might be a good way for people to weigh in?
Well, when I say people, I'm not thinking that you could have the entire, citizenry vet somebody, but there would have to be a commission, and maybe it would be, a committee within the Board of Aldermen, but there would be some kind of a committee that would make that initial vetting of someone that was interested. If you made it too big, I think you'd have it bogged down. I think it would have to be a committee charged with that responsibility that would have to understand and appreciate what goes into the duties and responsibilities of a commissioner. And I think it would be a smaller group that would make that decision and then send that forward to the governor's office or the councilors. But at least have that, pass that initial muster here in the city where they would serve.
It certainly seems like some transparency there would be
Right.
critical. The other piece of the legislation that I'd love to hear you weigh on is the change in how commissioners could be removed.
I don't know of any that have been removed. It's funny, I only know of, I think one resigned back in, I think the last time I weighed in on this, which was like 2014, I think a commissioner resigned voluntarily as a result of a poor decision-making at the time. I don't know of any that have actually ever been removed. I don't know that there's even a mechanism in place to do that, so I'm not really sure. And I would suspect that the people that did the appointing would have to be the ones that could rescind that somehow. I know certainly the police wouldn't have the ability to remove their boss, but I'm thinking probably the governor or his council would have that, somehow have that ability to retract somebody's appointment if in fact it was good cause.
Yeah, just for your knowledge, I actually pulled it up because it's in front of me here. The piece of legislation that was put forward to us has the mayor or president of the Board of Aldermen with the advice and approval of the Board of Aldermen shall have full power to remove any commissioner.
That would be under the proposal that's being put forth now?
Yes.
I guess it would stand that whoever was the appointing authority would have the authority to remove that for cause. Yes.
That's what's missing.
Yeah, there's no cause in there. That's a good point. Those were my questions. I think, Alderman Clee.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Chief, for coming. I know it's not always fun to sit here and be drilled and so on, so I'd like to kind of talk about two different things. One is you said that, and this was just a kind of a pulling it out of the air, having a commission or something that would vet and then send the information up to Concord. But with the current proposal, with the coming through the nomination through the president of the board or with the mayor, it would have to go through our personnel committee, through the BOA. And it would have public hearings and so on. In many respects, wouldn't that be kind of vetting it? You'd have the public input, you would have the personnel and administration committee kind of also talking to them and asking questions. That's kind of, so I didn't know if that is similar to what you were talking about when you were saying a commission or something, or were you looking at a different grouping of people?
That would be the same. To me, that would be going right in line with what I'm against.
Okay,
I would be looking for something very informal where someone calls some people and say, I'm interested, and they do a cursory check on them, and then they put it forth and rely on the governor's council and the governor's office to follow through as they have been for that much time. But what you're describing to me would, in my mind, be kind of what I'm opposed to. You're getting too many city people involved, and then you start to decline back into, well, if you're involved to this point, then you may have the ability to control it further than I'd like to see it. So that would be my understanding of how.
And I completely understand that.
Okay.
The other thing that was brought up was about the removal of the commissioners. The current system states that the mayor with the president of the Board of Aldermen, with the advice of the Board of Aldermen, and probably you would feel the same way as you've just spoken to, that they would have to do the removal process. So it wouldn't just be the mayor could say, for instance, like other appointments that he or she make, I can just remove them for his own reasons and so on. This would have to go through the Board of Aldermen. That is almost exactly or verbatim to what the current system is. The governor would not just come and say to Nick Dahl, Commissioner Dahl, that's it, you're gone. He would have to get that vetted through his executive council, and depending upon the political climate up in Concord would determine whether or not that would actually happen. So just wanted to clarify that as far as the removal process. I think it's very similar to what it is now.
I have no knowledge, as I indicated, I have no knowledge of how it has been set up. I would just be, I guess as a blanket response, I'm opposed to anything that would involve control locally, I guess more than it already is.
Okay. Then the next question I have, it would just be more of the similar thing. So thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Other questions? Alderman Wilshire?
I just have a statement, not really a question. I believe the political climate is kind of what brought us here. So if that's any indication, I agree that it should not be local. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Alderman Clee.
Thank you. Kind of more in response to President Wilshire's comment. I agree. In many respects, it is the political climate that brought us here. I know, speaking for myself, people keep saying over and over again, why? And it is the political climate that's up in Concord. And in my opinion, and I don't really want to insult anybody, but I'm going to speak very frankly, there's craziness going on up there. And as a state rep, I will say I see it firsthand. I see my calling the governor and getting a name of a person that should be able to answer my question. And he did return my phone call to tell me that he's not the person and gave me another person. And that person, after 6 phone calls, still has not returned my phone call, and 3 phone calls to the governor. I was really happy to hear at the last meeting, I think it was, that the chief called and was able to get information. So there is very heavy political climate up there. More and more, I don't want to say responsibilities, but more and more being taken away from the municipalities from up there. And being on the municipal and county government committee, again, I'm seeing it firsthand, and it's scaring me. So I think anything that we can have local control of and where the people do get to speak is extremely important. I recently was at a meeting where a senior person of the Nashua PD made a comment that when the governor and the executive council make their decision, they walk away and nothing more is done. That told me immediately that our commissioners, as good as they are, have no oversight. There's no one that they really have to answer to because no one is watching them. That means the taxpayers' dollars, as little as they are, have no say in it because the governor and the executive council are not watching. So I think everybody that's in place right now, I have no problems with, I have no questions with, but as we keep talking, we say, what about the next alderman? What about the next mayor? And we say it over and over again, and the truth is, you're right, what about them? What about the next commission? What if, God forbid, there was ever a Tom Elsier that was put on the commission? You know, that would be scary. But I can see it happening. I'm sorry, but I can see it happening. Depends on who's sitting up in that corner office in Concord and how much they like or dislike Nashua. And that bothers the heck out of me too. So I guess we see 2 sides to this coin. And I do really appreciate everything that you said. You're spot on with the comments that you make and so on, and I don't question a word of it, but I do think there's a flip side of that as well, so thank you.
Thanks, Alderman Clee. You're all set?
Yes.
Did you want to respond?
I think I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, I thought I heard you say something. I see Alderman Jettie.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Chief. It's nice to see you again.
You too.
I wasn't planning on getting on, but I wanted to clarify something when you talked about, when somebody asked you about, I think Chairman Kelly asked you about the removal process. I just want to point out for everyone's information that under the current system, the governor, with the advice and approval of the executive council, can remove a commissioner, and that's the same thing that is being provided under the proposal that the mayor and the president of the Board of Aldermen, with the approval and advice of the Board of Aldermen, could remove a commissioner. But I've been wanting to ask you this question. I really appreciate your service to the city and I have a lot of respect for you. I think you when you were chief, the department was very well run and people had a lot of respect for you, as they have with the people who have followed you. But when I've heard you tell the story about that awful situation where there were 3 aldermen that were convicted of taking bribes, the thought has always occurred to me that you, as in the National Police Department, did it ever? I know that eventually the FBI got involved and the convictions were, federal. The aldermen were convicted by a federal court and went to federal prison. When this thing first started, did it ever occur to you that it was too close and that you should have asked for help from the Attorney General's office or the county attorney's office? Did that ever occur to you at the time?
It didn't initially. It was a single allegation of bribery against one alderman. Chief at the time assigned myself and said, pick anybody in the department and he'll be your partner and do whatever you have to do to look into this. It was rather straightforward. It was once we developed the information and knew that we had that particular one, and of course, that one wanted to put himself in the best light as possible, so he began to make suggestions about others. When we looked at the state statutes for bribery, they had no teeth in them. And as a result of that, we knew I think he was the acting attorney general at the time, Jeff Howard. And we went up to his office and sat with him and said, can you help us make a recommendation to get us over to the federal process? Because they've got the Hobbs Act, which has a lot more strength in it. And we sensed that we might be going further than just one single alderman. So it was on our request, after having done the investigation into the first alderman, that we sought the assistance of the U.S. Attorney's Office, and by extension, there would be an FBI agent assigned with us as a result of that, and they did obviously agree to take it, but that's the genesis of how it occurred.
Okay, thank you. And I said this same thing to Chief Carrigan, and when he talked about being I'm not sure afraid is the right word to use, but concerned, I guess, would be that if the situation were changed, that that a commissioner, subject to local control, would try to exert some influence on the police department, about like the situation you had where, as I remember when you told the story, that there was some pressure being applied by one or more of these aldermen to stop the investigation. I ran into somebody who is a former police officer in Dover, and has gone on. He now works with CALEA, going around the country, training police departments, evaluating police departments. And I told him of Chief Carrigan's concern, and this person who worked for Dover, they don't have a commission. Their chief is appointed by the mayor. And I told him about Chief Carrigan's concern, and this individual said, well, that can't happen because it's against the law to interfere with a police investigation. And I've since looked up the state law, and he's correct. So when this alderman tried to get you to back off, did you consider charging him with violating that law?
I did not. And I actually have a newspaper article from April of 1995 in which I was quoted. And it was never me that received any of these calls for influence. It was then Chief Landry. And he made it clear, he called me in and explained to me that he was getting these calls. I've never discussed who the other aldermen were that were making calls, but what had happened was after we had finished with the three, we had begun to set our sights on some others. And they became concerned and they started making phone calls. And kind of ironic, one of them called the president of the board, which was one of the ones we had gone after, to try to get him to exert some influence. So I never received any of those calls myself. I know that Chief Landry said he got these calls. There was nothing illegal. They were kind of put together such as, geez, you found the first alderman. Can you be happy with that? You know, do you really have to go, how far do you want to go with this? It was rather benign, but it was subtle. And so there was nothing there that would have actually met the law, points of the law. So Chief Landry kind of felt at the time it was part of his responsibilities as the decision maker to field those calls. He wasn't intimidated by them. He just understood the kind of calls that were being made and the purpose for them. And he called me in, told me about them. And I remember him saying, Heff, you work for me and you work for the commission. Go out and do what you're supposed to do. Don't worry about anybody else. And that's kind of the way it went. But I never received any of that effort on my own.
Okay. And I also saw that in our ordinances, there is an ordinance that prohibits any alderman from trying to directly influence any of the division heads that work for the city. We as aldermen, we have to act as the board of aldermen, and we cannot go behind the mayor's back and try to we have no authority to order any division head much less the chief of police to do anything or not do something. And so that kind of brings up another thing. I know that under the current system, and as far as I can tell, this would not change if the police commissioners, I think you pointed out that the police commission is kind of independent, that it's separate from the police department, but it's also separate from city government and it's separate from state government. The police commissioners have, people keep referring to them as an independent body. So under this proposal, they would, there's no reason to believe that they would be anything different other than they would be appointed by the mayor and the president of the Board of Aldermen with the Board of Aldermen. Under the current system, a commissioner, I suppose a commissioner could try to exert influence inappropriately, and I assume that if they tried to do that I know when you were chief, you certainly wouldn't have allowed that to happen, and I'm sure Chief Carrigan wouldn't either. So, can you explain, if the way things are now, what would prevent a police commissioner from trying to do that, other than the integrity of the current chief and the way the police department operates, the integrity of the department? What's different now? What do you fear would be different in the future as compared to now?
To me, it goes back to that, the human nature. If someone is being appointed locally, I believe it's natural that person that's being appointed probably is like-minded with some of the individuals that are doing the appointing. And if there were an issue that came up, that appointing elected official would have more ability to direct or mold a commissioner to his or her way of thinking. And it would be more likely, my concern is that it would be more likely that a commissioner would be willing to listen to the plight of somebody that put them there if they were looking for some support in a particular area, or if it were to, geez, could you shut down an investigation? Can you be happy with the one alderman you got and not go crazy and try to, wipe out the entire board of aldermen? That would be my concern. It would be the nature of how humans work, and it would concern me that it was local, that they had that local connection and the ability to want to please the person that put them there. If that makes sense.
So you feel that under the current system, that the governor not being from Nashua and the executive counselor not being from Nashua, being from Milford, that provides an extra layer of insulation?
I do, but largely because it was always has been my understanding from reading some of the history on this, that was the way it was designed, that in most instances, the occasion where the governor was going to be from Nashua were far and few between, and as a result, that governor would not care necessarily about getting his involvement with the local Nashua Police Department, nor would most of the councilors. That was, as I said earlier, that would be my understanding of the attractiveness of it, was that it was supposed to have been by people that would be rather disinterested in what goes on in Nashua day to day, rather than having it appointed by people that are in the community and know people and come across people, and as a result, find themselves in the business with the law enforcement community. So it's my understanding that was the spirit of how it was first designed, to avoid the corruption that was apparently rampant back at the turn of the century.
So if, would you feel differently? I know that there's a person from Nashua, former Senator Ayotte, there's talk about her possibly running for governor. So if she became governor and there was an executive counselor from Nashua, would your feelings still be the same? Or I guess you feel the odds against that are good,
Well,
lessens the odds. Is that your feeling?
it's hard for me to answer that. I know her. I have the highest respect for her. But I think the spirit of this was that nobody was suggesting that it may not happen. I think either Judd Gregg or his father was the mayor of Nashua at one time, I think, during this process as well. So I think it has occurred before. And I think they felt strongly about it, but yet they were removed, and they felt strongly about the system. And I am unaware of any deficiencies in how that worked, even on that rare occasion when there was somebody from Nashua that was actually, in fact, in Concord.
Thank you, Chief. Alderman Liu?
Thank you. I just wanted to express that I just want to remind everyone that the concern here is that local politics may adversely affect the workings of the police department. And I've seen local politics adversely affect the workings of the Board of Aldermen when I've seen this particular resolution come to its first reading, and for the Board of Aldermen to be told by the three most senior people at that meeting that a necessary vote is required. And each one of these people, whether they had an agenda for hurrying the public hearing forward before any, while only the proponents were aware of it, or not. For some reason though, the honest truth did not come to light at the Board of Aldermen meeting. And the fact that a charter change can and often or nearly always does involve a committee hearing, a committee, vetting it. And then the necessity vote is then brought back if there's a recommendation. And I just want to point out that for all of us on the board, we observed this happening. We observed the Corporation Council and the mayor, who have both served as aldermen in this situation of a charter control in which they went through a different process. But when this came up, we were told over and over at that meeting, incorrectly, with no correction, that this is the way it has to happen. And I believe that's why the mayor's email address, list got rallied. And at that first public hearing, the only people that showed up were people that, were willing to stand behind the mayor. But at the same time, the mayor, who would be appointing this police commission, made no effort to correct the record that no, this necessity vote is not for, just to put this forward, but to send this to committee. In fact, this necessity vote is to schedule a public hearing. I mean, and Corporation Council, who works for the mayor, did not make that correction. And so this was a very politically motivated action. And for anyone to not be able to see how politics within of members acting within a single city can, exert influence on others, I just don't understand. We saw it happen. Thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
Just for a data point, and I don't know, with your background in internal affairs before you were chief, or do all of the police commissioners go through a formal background check?
Not by the department, no.
They don't?
No. Whatever was done outside the department. It did not involve us, at least during my time.
Do you think if somebody's being put in some type of control over a police department, that they should have a background check?
I believe so, but I assumed that was being done in Concord.
So it could have been done in Concord?
Yes, I always had assumed that was the case.
I'm raising my hand to myself. So the current chief spoke on this, and he told us that the background check is done by the state police and not by the local police.
That would make sense.
I was looking through my notes. All set, Alderman Dowd?
Yeah, I just wanted to leave, that somebody could be appointed a police commissioner with some kind of devious background. Hopefully, if they have a background check, either by the state police or the FBI, that's not gonna happen.
Thank you, Alderman Dowd. Alderman Clee, did you want to?
Actually, I think your committee member wanted to speak
Oh.
also.
I'll try to be brief. I just kind of wanted to follow on what some of the line of questioning from Alderman Jettie, where he was talking about it being, a crime to attempt to influence a police investigation. Understood. Is it far-fetched to think, after listening to you talk about your fears of how the hiring practices and the promotion practices might change, that could become an issue, that, you know, the police officer could potentially be, I don't know, probably don't want to say corrupt, but could be, you know, under the influence of the commissioner that has gotten them hired and promoted. So why wouldn't they maybe do what that commissioner is asking and not refer them for prosecution for interfering with it? Is that totally far-fetched, or is that a plausible scenario?
It's certainly plausible. I had never taken it to that extent downstream, but certainly it's certainly within the realm of what could develop. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Clee.
Thank you. One clarification, I did look up to see in 2016 who was the counselor, and that was Counselor Wheeler.
What time of year, though?
He was there, oops, I have it right here, hold on. Goodness me. Sorry.
While you look that up, I'll just mention that I did reach out to Counselor Wheeler and ask him to speak with the committee. I have yet to get a response, but just so you know that former and
He
current.
served in 2019.
Well, he was there from 2015 to 2017. That was his time in service. So 2016 would have fallen right in the middle there. So he was in office at that time. The question, I mean, actually the comment I had was, I made a comment about that I contacted the governor's office multiple times. And the thing that I actually had asked them very specifically was, I knew that they'd only done the reappointment, so they wouldn't have done any kind of background check. And I did ask them that question, whether or not they had or not. And if not, how did it happen? Was there an AG's or state police or FBI background? And that was the question that no one ever got back to me. That's why when I saw in the minutes that the chief had gotten an answer, I was very happy that at least they're willing to answer to somebody. So, thank you.
It's an interesting question too, though. If you're a commissioner and you get reappointed for 20 years, do you only get that background check at the beginning?
It would be my expectation that it would be renewed. Because certainly
At
a
each
lot can
renewal, you
lot
get a
can
new background
change.
check?
Certainly a lot can change, and things can occur if a commissioner were traveling to another state, and New Hampshire may not know what they had been involved in, say, the Carolinas or something. So I would expect that each time they're up for renewal, a refresher of that background was done again.
Has that been your experience, Commissioner Dahl?
That's behind the scenes, so to speak. I don't get contacted as part of that background investigation.
Okay.
Perhaps the chief could call.
We can ask.
I will say I have the highest level top secret clearance from the federal government, though, so I think we're good.
That helps.
Okay, are there any other questions? Committee members, Alderman, Zoom? Thank you very much for your time, Chief.
Thank you all for your
Appreciate it.
attentiveness.
Thank you.
Thank you, chief.
Yeah. It was not the intention to have two public comment periods, but they are on the agenda, so I will call for public comment again. If there's anyone who would like to speak, please come to the mic.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. That was my plan. I was gonna
Hi,
say that.
Jim Tolner, 1 Sequoia Circle. I'll be brief, just read a couple things. The process to become a police commissioner is not secretive, you know, as the mayor and others have stated. He's made some comments about he doesn't know what the process is, or it's a secretive process with a whisper and a tap on the shoulder. I think some of the testimony tonight will tell you that isn't the case. I myself got a phone call from Governor Hassan and asked me if I was interested. And then I was processed through the executive counselors. Just want to take a second. Last week, Alderman Kelly had asked, what makes a good commissioner? I will tell you what I believe makes a good commissioner. I believe living and investing in Nashua, achieving certain business level, being responsible for employees and budgets, having a proven track record, having strict boundaries, discretion, and limited social media presence. Integrity, as a couple people have mentioned tonight, along with the obvious criminal background requirements, make a good commissioner. I think it's a bonus that the people don't know who your commissioners are. That means no one's strutting around making it about themselves. If there was an issue and people needed to reach out to a commissioner, all they need to do is go to the website, simple process, make a phone call or email us. And by the way, as chairman, that happens all the time. I probably get anywhere from 8 to maybe a dozen phone calls a month from citizens that have concerns, and we address every single one of them. There is a place for everybody at the table, but some roles require a different energy, coupled with confidentiality. It's a balance, because it's not about the commissioner as an individual, it's about the institution. And I think no one said it better than Chief Heffern. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tolman.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. I just want to comment regarding the hurrying of the process. I think that was a real issue here. And I think there was a lot of political motivation in bringing forth this charter change the way it was brought forth. And I don't think proper policy was followed or practiced in the past. I don't know why Mayor Donchis and Attorney Bolton told the board that this was the process that was followed, and that deeply concerns me. Alderwoman Clee's comments about the political climate in Concord also really concerns me, because I think we have quite a challenging political climate right here in Nashua, and we should focus on it locally. You know, one of the things and problems I do see is I don't like to see aldermen or alderwomen who serve in Concord sitting in this circle, because their influence on what they see in Concord is driving too many decisions locally, and I don't think they're balanced. So I think we have plenty of political problems right here in this city, and I am less worried about Concord and more worried about Nashua. As far as committee appointments down here, our process for appointing to committees and vetting it and allowing the public to know how these citizens get appointed and what their background's on is non-existent. The case in point was the Board of Assessors. I applied. The mayor never acknowledged my application. Truthfully, looking back at it, I think I was qualified for that job. I was a woman. I could have done that job well with my engineering background. I was worthy of a response from the city, and I got nothing. Not at all. And with multiple phone calls and resends on the application, there was still no acknowledgement. So I know how this mayor plays the game, and he does play a game, and I don't want that game played with commissioners. Regarding hiring practices that the former chief just spoke about, I think he said that poor hiring practices was what results in lawsuits and litigation that he was party to when he was listening to other departments as he was traveling. I couldn't agree with him more. And I think the hiring practices of the Nashua Police Department are standards that are hard to come by in any other department. And there's a level and an excellence there that's unprecedented. When you look at the hiring practices in City Hall, I don't think you could go much lower. So there's a stark contrast there. Who you know matters, and the less you know, the higher you go. And that's why we have so many problems in City Hall. We promote directors and managers that have no resumes to support it, put them in charge of 6 or 8 departments, say, hey, they can work 80 hours a week, they're awesome.
Your time's up.
And they're not doing it. I don't want a mayor who operates under those hiring practices to hire or be part of the hiring process for commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Sue Newman, again, 25 Charlotte Avenue. My question, I guess, is for the chair and this committee as a totally process question. no matter which way the question is resolved by the voters in the election, what happens with this committee? So if it's yes, we do something, and if it's no, we do something else? Maybe you haven't gotten that far yet to make to decide that, I don't know. That's my question to you. Thank you.
I'll answer. We have, as a committee, have committee meetings set up through the end of the year. I mean, our goal is to talk through this as we were asked to by the process of the Board of Aldermen. And, you know, the petition's out there, we understand that it's out there, but it's not really within our purview. We're trying to get as much information out there as possible, which is why we've had more meetings the first couple of weeks here to really try to have each side be able to talk through some of these parts. But our goal, we have committee meetings till the end of the year. I don't think I can answer that until we see what happens on November 2nd, and the committee will meet after that. Did someone want to weigh in on that? I didn't, or was it? Okay, I thought I heard something. Okay. Sonia Prince.
Hi, thank you. I just want to reiterate what Alderman Trish Cleese said. I just did a quick Google.
Sonia, can you state your name and address for record?
Sonia Prince, 49 Tufts Drive. Executive Councilor Wheeler did serve from 2015 to 2019. Pignatelli was 2012 to 2014, so just clarifying that. I did hear some things about, you know, political and criminal of people in political places, but I do believe there have been some police commissioners who were appointed with possible shady past, but because of some court docs that were sealed, we will never know. It's all hearsay. But there were some former commissioners who, for instance, owned a local car garage and had the contract for our police cruiser repairs, who paved over a sidewalk one year behind Riverwalk Cafe, and aldermen and alderwomen were threatened that if they said anything, they would be ticketed, which also Mayor Lozo had a similar experience on a different topic. And then we had Duckgate, of course, and that person stepped down. So there has been some, you know, shady things happening on all sides. So politics is everywhere, regardless of what you think. And the chief did make it really clear last week at the study committee that he would still prosecute any popular citizen or person of influence if the evidence showed a need to investigate, regardless of their position at the Board of Aldermen. He said it would just, quote, be uncomfortable and make them a little nervous. But you know what? I'm sure they'd be nervous if they had to investigate a family member or somebody close to them that they really liked. So it is what it is. They still have to do their job. Their job is to uphold the law. Mr. Heffern, or Chief Heffern, sorry, mentions no real evidence in regards to the no-name person of influence he claimed wouldn't cooperate with a past police investigation as an example he gave. And nowhere, it went nowhere, he claimed. So that's kind of hearsay. But he did mention that when he did consider or get a call from the mayor, who is a political influence, about his son applying for a job, he did not hire the son who applied, which is the same professionalism that we would expect would be used if the police had to investigate any person of influence, regardless of the local control appointments being local. And just a reminder, the police department is the largest chunk of our city government budget, and they answer to the people. So the people do deserve representation, local hearings, accountability. They should be vetted by the 15 elected people of the board, who are elected by all national voters. But a lot of people I talked to at every door were actually surprised that we had 3 police commissioners. They all thought we just had the one. Did she say time?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Remarks by committee. Anyone from the committee would like to make remarks? Thought I heard something.
Well.
Oh, there's one more hand. Did I miss someone? I'm fine to go back. Matt Gouffro?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I just don't think you saw that I had my hand up.
I saw it up and then I saw it back down, so I thought maybe you changed your mind. Go ahead.
It's the buttons. I'm sorry, I'm not used to doing a lot of this on Zoom. So I appreciate you allowing public comment on this. And for the record, I'm Matthew Guthrow, 104 Fawn Lane in Nashua. So I was disappointed to see the mayor's email out concerning this topic. I think it's funny that he can boast about the bond rating when it comes to taxpayer dollars, but he can't boast about Nashua being recognized as the 3rd safest city in the nation. I think everyone needs to understand that when the mayor refers to what Nashua citizens want, we should take note that less than 2.7% of the voters here in Nashua signed this petition. It's a far cry from the 10% for a change to our city charter. It's also important to know that the language on the ballot question doesn't even match the petition that was used to place this question on the ballot. This is how extremely rushed this process was. This mayor is not looking for local control. He started this initiative after his attempt to cut the police budget failed, and his veto was overruled by you, the Board of Aldermen. What the mayor is now looking for is total control. For example, there's no mention of what the criteria would be used to remove a sitting police commissioner, or what criteria they would use to appoint someone to that position either. In total, a meager amount of signatures were obtained for a ballot question that doesn't match what the petition says, and the ballot inquiry simply has more questions than answers. That's why you, our Board of Aldermen, voted to table this charter amendment until a more thoughtful question could be presented to the voters. I thank you for doing that, and I thank you for the work that you are doing here in looking at this instead of being rushed. This should be more thoughtfully looked at and presented to the voters. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We are back to remarks by committee members. Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, the Board of Ed budget is by far the highest budget by order of magnitude, and the police and fire are pretty close. I have a little knowledge of that being the budget chair, so. The other thing is, the question was asked, what happens if it passes or doesn't pass in the November 2nd? Well, one thing, if it does pass, there still has to be a process worked out. And that could get into how do people get asked to be commissioners? Do they get a background check? There's a huge amount of process that would have to be involved. And someone through the Board of Aldermen will have to set that up, so.
That's a good point. Thank you, Alderman Dowd.
I'd like to add one thing
Mandel.
if I could. Thank you.
Sure.
I just also want to point out that, yes, the police department may have a $32 or $35 million budget, but the police commissioners do not have any control over that. The Board of Aldermen do already. We certainly make suggestions to the leadership at the police department, but I can tell you in the 6 years I've been a commissioner, it's never been, let's spend more money. Thank you.
Other committee comments? Second bite? All right, Alderman Dowd.
One last thing. It was brought up that the Board of Aldermen restored the monies that were cut for the police budget. That's true. But what we did is we restored the money to the budget that would allow them to keep the same exact services they had in 2019 or 2020. And that was critically important for the safety and welfare of all the citizens of Nashville.
If I recall, we also changed one of the line items to a SURF account to accommodate for that.
Yes.
It was, yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe that was the change. Okay. If there are no other comments by committee members, I just want to say thank you to everyone who attended, who brought forth public comment, for all former counselors and chief, who were giving of their time to this important issue. And
Madam Chair, may I just make a comment?
Alderman Glee.
My husband just texted me that the Red Sox had another grand slam. I just had to share that.
Oh, can we go home now? Do I have a motion?
Not okay.
Seriously, I wasn't even thinking about it till you said that. Do I have a motion?
I motion we adjourn.
Move to adjourn by roll call.
Nope, let me get my sheet of paper. Alderwoman Kelly,
Yes.
Alderman Dowd,
Yes.
Mary Lou Blaisdell,
Yes.
Mark Brave,
Yes.
Kendra Smith,
Yes.
Deborah Novotny,
Yes.
Terry Baxter,
Yes.
and Nick Dahl votes yes.
And we are adjourned. I don't know what time it is. 9:05. Go Sox. Thank you.